Are you preparing for the fantasy football draft? If so, you won't want to miss this episode where we talk about quarterbacks. Who are the top 10 quarterbacks? Who are the up-and-coming ones? And we'll give you detailed analysis so you can pick the right one for your team. And all that is coming up now. Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Kurtzman.
And I'm Eric Lee, and we are the Fantasy Football Consultants. And Gary, I'm really excited about this show. I've been waiting for a while to get to the rankings of quarterbacks. We have our top 10 quarterbacks you should be targeting in your draft, and we'll get straight to the list. At number 1, it's not going to be a big surprise.
Nope.
It's Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
It's the same place he's been the last 3 or 4 years. Gary, why is he so good? It's because the Packers throw the ball, especially near the end zone. In 2015 and 2016, he averaged 2.5 TDs, passing TDs per game.
Number 1 in the NFL over that time period, by the way.
Last year, 2.2. And then in the offseason, what do? They give him another huge red zone target in Jimmy Graham, who led all tight ends last year with 10 TDs.
Yep.
He is poised to have a monster season. In addition to that, he will help you with his legs. He gets at least 20 rushing yards, which is not bad for a quarterback per game. So very high floor if you're going to go with Aaron Rodgers. Now the detractors would say, hey, what about his injury? You know what? You worried about his injury?
No.
No problem. He came back last year from that shoulder injury to throw 290 yards and 3 TDs in one game. Then they shelved him because they were out of the playoffs.
And that's the key point to remember, folks. They shelved him not because he wasn't ready to come back, not because he re-aggravated the injury, but Eric, as you said, simply because they were out of the playoffs. Eric, it's as simple as this. Russell Wilson can beat you with his legs. He's been Seattle's leading rusher for the last few years in a row now, and I get the Rashad Penny drafting. I certainly get the Chris Carson and the potential innate talent. He is going to lead, he being Russell Wilson, the Seattle Seahawks in rushing again. Why? Because he does every year. And the reality is this, Eric. You know what? He's responsible for just about every Seattle touchdown they score. Seattle scored 38 touchdowns last year. 37 of them was on Russell Wilson's arm or Russell Wilson's leg. That's the reason primarily why he was the number 1 quarterback in the league last year. And to hear Pete Carroll talk, sure, they're going to try and emphasize the running game. He said the same thing for the last 3 years. But their offensive line hasn't gotten any better. Their defense has gotten worse. So believe me, there's going to be so much more reason for Russell Wilson to be scrambling and Russell Wilson to be throwing in 2018 as there ever was in 2017 and 2016. This is a game of opportunity. He'll have even more opportunity next year, or this year rather, than he has in the previous years. There's no reason to believe Wayne won't be the top quarterback, one of the top quarterbacks again in 2018. That's why he's number 2 on our list.
Number 3 on our list is Deshaun Watson. Now, some people may have forgotten that he was not the starter at the beginning of last year. It was Tom Savage. That lasted all of 3.5 quarters before they switched over to Deshaun Watson. Yeah, Savage was
savage.
Yeah. After getting his feet wet in the second week, the following 5 weeks before his season-ending ACL knee injury was amazing. Listen to these stats. He threw for 294 yards. He got 3.6 TDs per game, and he combined that with 37 yards rushing.
Wow! Wow! All I can say is wow!
All right, before we lose our collective minds, let's recognize the detractors out there would say, look, he only has had 6.5 games of NFL experience. Defensive coordinators will be better prepared this year to game plan against him. And he did have that ACL injury, which he already had another knee that had ACL. So both knees have been reconstructed through surgery. You know what?
Eric, you're not worried about him not being ready for opening day.
I am not, and the detractors say there's no way that he can duplicate that over a 16-game season. Of course he can't. We don't need him to. If he can just give us 80% of that production, he is going to be very valuable as the number 3 QB on our list.
Yeah, absolutely, and lucky for him, if you can use lucky as a term, with ACL surgery that he had it so earlier in the season. Certainly with an 8 to 10, healing window, that should put him back in the beginning of the season. So you're right, absolutely, no worries there. Number 4, Cam Newton of the Carolina Panthers. Now, once again, another high floor guy. They're all high floor guys in our tier 1 list of quarterbacks. Leads the NFL virtually every year. Leads the NFL quarterbacks virtually every year in rushing. And, again, here's another example. We talked about this with Russell Wilson. We're talking about it again here with Cam Newton. Ron Rivera, the coach, says, well, we're going to try and reduce our reliance on Cam Newton's legs. Guys, look, he said that for the last 3 years in a row now. 2 of the last 3 years, he's led the NFL QBs in rushing. In the third year, he was the second. Look, this is a guy whose legs are so valuable, and his size, he's basically like a linebacker who knows how to throw a football, Eric. There's no way the defensive backs can tackle him. It takes a linebacker, it takes a safety, which means it literally is changing the defensive alignment to force these guys to account for Cam Newton as a runner. There's virtually no other player in the NFL like him. He's got some accuracy concerns. Of course he does. This is why, if he didn't have accuracy concerns, he would easily be the number 1 quarterback in the league from a fantasy perspective. Because Lord knows he leads the QBs in rushing touchdowns, he leads the QBs in rushing yards, and he still has a rocket arm that he can launch the ball to downfield to guys like Ted Ginn and others. The bottom line is this. In a bad year last year, and it was a bad year from a completion percentage standpoint, from an overall QB rating standpoint, in a bad year last year, he still finished well into the top 10 in fantasy perspective from quarterbacks. There's no reason in the world why he won't be a top 5, which is where he's been 2 out of the last 3 years, even if he just reverts to his mean.
And I like the fact that he's going to get his safety valve, Greg Olsen, back for the entire year. I think rookie DJ Moore will be a nice impact in helping Cam Newton in the passing stats. And Christian McCaffrey will have another year under his belt. And he's been sensational coming out of the backfield. At number 5 of the list, so let's actually quickly review. Our top tier was Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson of the Texans, and Cam Newton of the Panthers. Just below that, starting our second tier, is Carson Wentz. And look, Carson Wentz may not be too happy with us because he belongs in that first tier, but for one reason, Gary, he had that ACL surgery. And you go, wait a minute, Deshaun Watson had an ACL surgery and you have him in the top tier. Here's the difference. Carson Wentz's injury happened much later in the year, and there is a real question mark about whether he'll be ready for Game 1. In addition to that, Philadelphia has another great alternative. They have Nick Foles, Super Bowl MVP last year. He's not going to take Carson Wentz's job, but it allows the Eagles to be more cautious.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making him the second highest paid backup quarterback in football. They wouldn't do that unless they thought they need him to start the season, especially with the opportunity cost of being able to trade him and easily get a second-round pick in return. Some people are speculating more than that. Again, for a backup quarterback, that's a lot to give up. But the Eagles decided to forego that opportunity, which means that they think that they're going to need him to start the season. But Eric, it sounds like Carson Wentz is well worth waiting for.
Yes, and why? Because just look at his sophomore campaign. He threw 33 TDs in 13 games.
Yeah.
That 33 TDs is more than Tom Brady threw, and he played all 16 games. And unlike Tom Brady, Carson Wentz is going to help you with his legs, 22 rushing yards per game. So we're very high on him. We're just concerned about his injury status.
And by the way, just for the viewers at home, we actually do like Tom Brady. In fact, we like him enough to be number 6 on our list, assuming we haven't already lost the New England viewers after that. Why? Well, it certainly isn't because of his legs. You heard this guy talk about that. Yes, he doesn't get rushing. He actually does get a few rushing touchdowns, but he doesn't get very many rushing yards.
That's old news, Gary. Old news. The man's 41 years old. He's not calling his number at the 1 yard line.
Old news. He is old. He's 41 years old. Sure. Absolutely. I get all that. And I get the fact that he doesn't have Nate Solder at left tackle anymore. And left tackle is the most important position on the line. And he doesn't have Brandon Cooks, who is probably argued to be Ron Gronkowski for the tight end. But arguably Brandon Cooks was equally as important as a valve for Tom Brady. And now he's on the Rams. I get all that. But you know what? How many times have we seen New England replace some of the offensive line, or the defensive line for that matter, and have the line continue to perform extremely well? How many times have we seen receivers come in and out of the New England offense, same thing with running backs, and yet, but for the first 5 weeks last season, the New England offense has been a top 5 offense for the past 5 years, and that's probably much more than that. I just stopped collecting stats after 5 years. Guys, they're as consistent as they get, and Tom Brady is the field general. He's the guy at the helm. He's going to continue to do well, and that is why, in short, he's the number 6 quarterback on our list.
Number 7 on our list is Kirk Cousins.
You're way off. I say you're way off this time, son.
Hey. We're happy with Kirk Cousins at number 7. You ask, how could Kirk Cousins be in our top 8? Well, look, Kirk Cousins last year was in the top 8 of passing yards for QBs, was in the top 8 for passing touchdowns, and was in the top 8 for QBs for rushing touchdowns. Yeah. So we have confidence. And he did all that with the Redskins, and now he moves from the Redskins to the Minnesota Vikings, where he has better weapons to throw to. Stephon Diggs, Alan Thielen, and as far as getting touchdowns, Kyle Rudolph.
Absolutely. And, detractors will say Minnesota's offensive line is shaky. Well, Washington's offensive line was shaky too. That's probably about a wash, and yet, as you said, he was top 8 quarterback. In fact, top 8 quarterback 2 out of the last 3 years. He's consistent. He's in a better situation. I love that pick at number 7.
Minnesota wants to run the ball, and I know a lot of people point that out. They ran the ball a very high percentage of their plays last year, but you have to remember that was under Case Keenum. They didn't pay over 3 years, $84 million to Kirk Cousins.
For him to hand off.
Yeah, so there we go.
No, that's right. And Dalvin Cook will get his, of course, but this is going to be a very good offense, and Kirk Cousins will also get his. So at number 8, and I should say falling all the way to number 8, Drew Brees of the New Orleans Saints.
I am shocked and chagrined, mortified, stupefied.
I get it. Big name and big talent like Drew Brees. Eric, all he did was lead the NFL in completion percentage last year. And by the way, if you just go by QBR, quarterback rating, top 5. And he's undoubtedly been the top 5 for most of the years he's been playing. He's a generational talent. Why does he fall to number 8 on our list? The NFL, as in fantasy, as in real life, is a land of opportunity. And the Saints did something very, very different last year. They handed the ball off to Alvin Kamara, to Mark Ingram, 47% of the time. That's huge. It was in the very low 40s for most of Drew Brees' tenure. But all of a sudden they changed because all of a sudden, well, A, they got more talent at the running back position. There's no question about that. And B, they have a new philosophy. Same coach, Sean Payton. But this same coach, Sean Payton, says they're going to do the same thing again this year that they did last year.
And why not? They were so successful last year.
They were a miracle play away from being in the NFC Championship game. A lot of people forget that.
Let's take a look at those other quarterbacks that we like. After Mariota, we have Alex Smith, Jameis Winston once he comes back from suspension, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, and even Big Ben Roethlisberger.
How about them Cowboys?
No.
No Dak Prescott?
No Dak Prescott. So, but those are a lot of guys. I personally see the depth at QB even greater than we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in fantasy. So potentially waiting isn't a bad strategy on quarterbacks. There will be good quarterbacks that go undrafted.
Certainly.
So let's just wrap up our video now. I just want to thank everybody for watching. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like the video. And if you haven't yet, click the red subscriber button and then the bell icon so you can be notified of all our future videos.
And in addition, we always update our analysis and our projections each and every day in real time. So please go to fantasyfootballconsultants.net, not just for your updated analysis for quarterbacks, but for every position.
And finally, please feel free to share our video with your friends and league mates.
I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to call the newspapers, the TV stations, the gas stations, everybody.
And until the next video, we will see you then.
See you next time.